What's up YouTube and welcome to the Trials of Coastal story summary on the Ashen Chevalier. As always, it's an absolute pleasure to have you guys here. If you like what you see, please hit that red subscribe button and leave a like and or comment to let me know. I'm pretty excited about this one since it's the final chapter of the first game. If you've missed any of the previous videos, you can hit up the playlist in the card or description and get yourself caught up. Before we jump into the final chapter, we have the intermission, so let's get started, right? Where are we going? Yep, into the pits of Gehenna. At the close of September, Class 7 was summoned to the Valestein Palace in Heimdall. There, they were recognized for their bravery at both Guerrilla Fortress and the Saxon Iron Mine in Ruhr. It turned out their presence had been requested by none other than the Emperor of Erebonia himself, Eugen III. They were granted an audience with him, Empress Priscilla, Princess Oliver and Cedric, and Princess Alfin. During their visit, they also encountered Chancellor Osborne and Governor Regnitz, as well as the heads of the four great houses, Dukes Albarea and Cayenne, and Marquis Rogner and Hyarms. Emperor Eugen invited them to take a short vacation in a hot springs town which has ties to the imperial family. That town was none other than Emir, where Rean grew up. They went by special train followed by cable car for the last leg of the trip, and soon they found Emir, which was full of fall foliage. Upon arriving, they were shown to the Phoenix Wings, a gift from the imperial family where they would stay for the duration of their trip. They left their belongings in their rooms, then held a meeting to figure out everyone's roles in the concerts for the Academy Festival. And while some of the members of the group had objections, everyone eventually agreed to Rean, Elliot and Crow's various proposals. Afterwards, Rean was reunited with his father, Baron Theo Schwarzer, and his mother, Lucia Schwarzer. They were not related to him by blood, but they welcomed him as warmly as any biological parents would. Rean's father gave him a letter from Master Kafai, who seemed aware that Rean was still hesitating. All his classmates could do was watch over him as he continued to do so. That night, after his classmates had gone to bed, Rean received a surprising request from Angelica. She told him that her father forced her to withdraw from the academy, and as a parting gift she asked him to accept her orbal bike. Unsure what to do, he was unable to answer immediately and decided to think about it in the open-air bath. Talking to Laura and Alisa there eased his spirits, but as they spoke, he saw something that shocked him. It was snow, something he wouldn't have expected to see early in October. Snow continued to fall heavily well into the following morning, suggesting that something was amiss. Rean decided to find out what. In some ways, Rean took this as a chance to overcome a similar traumatic experience that occurred 8 years prior. His classmates happily accompanied him without a second thought. Soon enough they encountered a giant monster made of ice. After a fierce battle they defeated it and came face to face with Blue Blanc of Ouroboros. He was fascinated in the many mysteries surrounding Rean, even going so far as to taunt him. But Rean refused to be taken in by such pettiness, and Blue Blanc was forced to retreat. In the end, they were able to stop the strange snow and return to Emir unharmed. As Baron Schwarzer bade farewell to them, he handed his son a scroll that he had received from Master Kafai. It was an 8 leaves 1 blade intermediate level scroll which would give Rean a new target to work for. They said their farewells and finally left for the trip back to the academy, with Rean feeling as though they had all grown greatly as a result of the experience. Safely back from their trip to Emir, Rean and his classmates began practicing for their upcoming concert. Under the watchful eyes of Elliot and Crow, they put all they had into their practice sessions, and thanks in part to the fact that they weren't all complete amateurs, they were finally ready to perform. The time came for the preparatory day before the festival. Rean chose a classmate to accompany him to collect the finished outfits from a boutique in Heimdall, but walking out with the outfits in tow, he ran into someone he wasn't expecting to see. It was a famous opera singer, Vita Clotilde, also known as the Azure Diva, although Rean was more familiar with her as Misty, the host of a radio program broadcasting Trista. Having met her once already, Rean took the chance to invite her to attend the festival and watch their concert. The time finally came for the 2-day-long festival to begin. Rean spent the first day helping the student council visiting attractions with classmates in his spare time. As the day came to an end, Class 7 gathered for a final meeting to discuss the concert being held the next day. During the discussions, however, they heard the sound of a bell chiming from far away. The source of the chiming turned out to be the old schoolhouse that they had become so well acquainted with. Given permission by Sara and Principal Van Dyke, they descended to the lowest floor. Each and every one of them was stunned by its new appearance. After all, it literally seemed as though an entirely different world was within this building itself. Guided by Emma and Celine, who seemed to know something, they resolved to restore the building back to normal. Eventually, they found themselves in what could only be described as an otherworldly battlefield, face to face with a monstrous black shadow, Lower Erebonius. After a challenging battle, they were able to defeat it, overcoming the trial that it represented. They were transported and knocked out in the aftermath, but once they had opened their eyes, they discovered the building was back to normal. Suddenly, a door that was before them opened. On the other side stood a giant humanoid, a 7-arch tall, ash-coloured knight. The next day, the second day of the festival began. Rean managed to put the knight out of his mind enough to focus on showing elites who had come to visit around the academy campus. During that afternoon, the time finally came for their concert. Each of them gave their all to their performance, and they were able to finish both songs. When the audience feverishly called for an encore, Class 7 was more than prepared to perform a third. During the third song, the audience was invited to sing along, and the concert proved to be an immense success. After the concert, the after-party began. Rean thanked Crow for all that he had done for him. Encouraged by Elise, Rean also decided to spend some one-on-one time with someone close to him. Unfortunately, the party was brought to an abrupt end by a shocking proclamation from Principal Van Dyke. He appeared to tell them that the Guerrilla fortress to the east had vanished without a trace, and when I say vanished, I mean completely blown off of the map. A week passed since then, and the air in Erebonia was more tense than ever before. It was concluded that the fortress's disappearance was due to an attack by Crossbow State. Of course, if you've played the Crossbow games, you would know what the actual reason for this is. Shortly after, it was announced that Chancellor Osborne would be making a speech to the nation at noon. Rean and his classmates chose to listen to the speech through a radio in their classroom, once they had located Milliam, who was wandering around the old schoolhouse. Only Crow was missing, having supposedly gone to Heimdall to hear the speech in person. The time for the speech finally came. Osborne's words were forceful and provocative, making it clear that it would end in a declaration of war, and not just against Crossbow, but against the Calvin Republic as well, who was believed to be backing the state. However, just as he was about to make that decisive declaration, the sound of a gunshot resounded through the skies of the capital. The left side of Osborne's chest was pierced, and he collapsed to the ground in a pool of his own blood. The spectators let out terrified screams as they watched in horror. The sniper who shot him was none other than C, the Imperial Liberation Front leader who was believed to have met his end in Ruhr, and his true identity was finally revealed to be the former member of Class 7, Crow Armbrust, courtesy of Captain Claire from the RMP. Meanwhile, the students of Thors were able to witness the whole string of events through the radio broadcast. At first, they were merely listening to what was happening, but then Misty spoke directly to them. After she spoke, the classroom was filled with the echo of an eerie chant, and a window into what was happening appeared before them. Emma shared details about Vita, the Witch of the Abyss, whom she described as something like her sister to her. However, they were all too shocked by what was happening to pay any real attention to her words. As they watched the glimmering visions of the capital before them, a giant silver airship appeared from above the clouds. From it began to fall countless humanoids, all which immediately set about taking over the city. They were 7-arched tall knights known as Panzer Soldaten, made with modern orbital technology. The Noble Alliance had built them some time in advance, all in preparation for this day. The Soldaten used their incredible mobility to overwhelm the main battle tanks guarding Heimdall, and in no time at all, they reached Valflame Palace, making their occupation of the city complete. In command of that operation were members of Zephyr, the Jaeger Corps that Fee once belonged to. Nearby, Vita Clotilde stood on top of the Heimdall Opera House, blissfully watching the silver arc descend upon the palace. She was met by Blue-Blanc, who praised her work, addressing her as Ouroboros' second Anguis. With an elegant smile, she accepted his words, then confidently issued a proclamation. The bells are tolling for Crossbow, and the preparations here are complete. Still, even this grand undertaking is but a jewel in a greater crown, the second stage of the Orpheus final plan. The symphony awaits us, let the second movement commence. Meanwhile, Rean and his classmates weren't allowed much time to process what they had just seen. Not long after their windows on Heimdall closed, they realized that soldiers were fast approaching Trista too. Sara, Neidhart, the principal, and several other instructors defended the west exit valiantly. Eventually, they also received the aid of Sharon, who revealed herself to be an enforcer of Ouroboros as well. But while they still had their hands full, another group of soldiers began approaching from the east of the town. As such, Class 7 resolved to protect the east exit themselves. The battle for Trista began. First, Class 7 fought against a Draken soldier, and by aiming for its joints they emerged victorious. But in a sad twist of fate, they were powerless to defeat the much stronger Spiegel unit the terrorist Scarlet was piloting. Rean resolved to use the power deep within her as a last resort, but before he could, he heard a voice resound in his mind. "Dost thou desire the power?" He was standing in a strange, empty space. Before him stood Celine, who urged him to call the voice's name. Loudly and clearly, he did just that. "Heed my call, Valimar, the Ashen Knight." With a bang, the humanoid that they found in the old schoolhouse came flying through the air towards them. It landed, and Rean entered its core along with Celine. Although he had never seen the inside of such a thing before, he instinctively knew how to pilot it, and with that knowledge, he was able to easily beat Scarlet Spiegel. The air was filled with the cheers of his classmates, but they were soon silenced by a familiar voice. Whoa, hold up there just a sec, aren't you forgetting something?" It came from above. The source of the voice was a large blue humanoid, one similar to the Divine Knight Rean was piloting. It was the Azure Knight, Ordean, piloted by none other than Crow. Rean despaired at the thought of having to fight him after all the time they had spent together. He tried whatever he could to reason with him desperately, attempting to avoid any further conflict. Yet Crow refused to listen, and with a wry smile, he declared that the Crow Rean thought he knew was never real. Nonetheless, Rean made one last-ditch attempt at trying to change his mind. "So that's the plan if you win, huh? But what if I win?" Rean trusted that Crow would come back to him and the rest of Class 7 if he proved victorious, and the battle between the two Divine Knights began. The power of Crow's Azure Knight was immense, but Rean fought back as hard as he could, and he found himself able to fight on equal terms. Finally, Rean saw the decisive opening he'd been searching for: enlightened domination. The Azure Knight fell to its knees from the impact of Valimar and Rean's attack. His classmates cried out with relief, but that relief was not to last. The next moment, the Azure Knight transformed, surging with mana. It drew closer to the Ashen Knight. Rean was stunned. All it took was a single hit from Ordean to send him flying backwards, defeated. His consciousness began to fade, and all he could do was wince in fear as the Azure Knight approached. No you don't. Without hesitation, his classmates stood between him and Ordean in a protective stance. They didn't have a chance of defeating it, but they were determined not to let it draw any closer to Rean. Together, they resolved to buy him the time to escape, believing that he could one day bring the war to an end. Rean tried to protest, but Celine ordered Valimar to retreat from the area. Rean cried out in objection, his consciousness growing even fainter. From outside, one of his close friends bade him farewell. It was clear from their voice how much they cared for him, how prepared they were to face anything, even death. Fighting back tears, Rean cried out to them as our Ashen Knight took to the sky. All he could do was watch from above as a hopeless battle began. "No, they need me, let me stay!" His cries resounded endlessly throughout the crimson sky. And that, my dear friends, is the end of Trails of Cold Steel. We finally made it, and I really hope that this journey has been worth your while. Thank you so much for watching this series. The next job is to get the story summaries for 2 and 3 out as well. I may do them slightly differently, and maybe not in chapters, but rather cut the game up into digestible chunks myself and release them as parts. Anyway, it's been great having you. This has been the Ashen Chevalier. Please like, share, comment and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Until the next time, keep moving forward relentlessly without looking back. Peace.